All right, onward we go to the last of the protectionist diagrams. This one is focused on the quota. Now, this one is last of the three because it's the most complicated and it's super cool, I think, the way you sort of build it, all right? So a quota, remember, is a physical limit on the number of things that come into a particular country. So the example I used earlier was, Chile makes a bunch of wine, the best wine in the world. You heard it. It is the best wine in the world, made here in Chile. And so maybe the Chilean government would want to set a quota on the amount of wine coming from the neighboring nation of Argentina, which also makes fantastic wine. Not really as good as Chilean wine, but makes fantastic wine. Okay, so a quota would be a physical limit on the amount of wine bottles that come over the Argentinian border. So go back to old times, like think about trucks of wine coming over the border. This is still what happens. And there's some customs agent, some dude going 1, 2, 3, and he's counting up to a certain number of bottles, and then guess what? Boom! No more wine can come into Chile from Argentina. So at a certain point, all of the wine that could possibly come from Argentina is stopped, okay? So that's an example. If you translate that over to the United States, let's say, because that'll fit better with the diagrams, imagine that the United States, same construct, is trying to protect its farmers. Its farmers from what? Corn coming in from outside the United States, okay? So when looking at this diagram, and you've seen this already, protective tariff, protective subsidy diagram, protected quota diagram, they start in the same place. The story in economics always starts in the same place because guess what? It's the same story, right? But now the outcome is going to be that the government's going to protect its corn producers, not by a tariff or a subsidy, but by a quota. Okay. So in the beginning, to repeat, right? Where do we start? P1, Q1. This was all the revenue that the United States farmers were making from corn. Then the United States opened up its borders, and all of a sudden, all of the corn that was coming in from the U.S. was now, all the corn coming in, now all of a sudden, the equilibrium of corn in the United States dropped from PW to Q2, okay? So this is where the market was functioning, all right? What part of that revenue was coming or going into the pockets of U.S. producers? Well, that's pretty easy because all we have to do is look at this supply curve here, and we know that at PW, only Q2 amount of corn can come in. So PW times Q2 is the revenue earned by U.S. producers. Okay? Then what's the next step? This is repetitive. You already know this. The next step then is to take a look at how much revenue is for world producers. Well, guess what? World producers took in money from what? Q2, oh, that's terrible, from Q3 up to PW, out to Q2. So that box represents the revenue box of what? World producers of corn in the United States. Okay? We've set up the same story we set up in the protective subsidy and the protective tariff diagram, right? What happened? Well, all these people who are real families, real U.S. citizens with voting power in the United States lost their farms. Out of business. Ciao. You can't do it anymore because it's too expensive. And therefore, they went to their government, the U.S. government, and said, hey, man, that's not cool. You got to protect us. And so the government, instead of doing a protective tariff or a protective subsidy, they did something called a protected quota, which is saying, listen, we're going to limit we're going to put a physical limit on the bushels of corn that can come into the United States. And as a result of that, what happens in the diagram is really cool. And so pay attention, okay? I'm going to erase these revenue boxes so that you can see, okay? So that you can see this more clearly. All right. So what the government's going to do is going to say, remember. And you got to follow the progression here. The United States is going to set a physical limit on corn coming into the United States, a physical set number of bushels. Let's make it 100,000 bushels. Okay. So when we start off at 0, guess what? And this is a suspension of reality, but follow along with this and you'll get it. What's going to happen is the first, second, third, fourth, all the way up to Q3, all of this corn is coming from the United States. And then, suspend reality, and then what's going to happen? The U.S. is going to open up its borders and allow that corn to come in from outside. And so as a result, where's the corn going to come from? Watch the arrow. It's going to come from world producers, and the government's going to start counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way up to what? 100,000 bushels of corn. And let's say that is right here. So then, once it gets to 100,000 bushels of corn, boom, the government is going to close the border. Ciao. No more corn coming from Mexico or coming from Canada. And therefore, you have a new supply curve right here. I'm going to clean this up in the next video, okay, of S domestic minus the quota, okay? And therefore, you can kind of see already that there's going to be a new box right here that represents what? Well, that box, remember, that box is probably going to represent the number, the revenue of corn from outside the U.S. Remember, because what happened? From Q0 to Q3, U.S. produced corn. From Q3, we'll call that Q4, you'll see it on the next diagram more clearly, that came from the world. Then what? Boom, back to, who are these people? These people are U.S. producers again, okay? So one way that I kind of talk about this diagram, if you look at this, it's kind of nicer to think about the quota diagram as like this actual supply curve, not shifting, but like being broken off right at PW and then moved out to there and then starting again. And then you would end up with a supply curve in the U.S. that would go like that, then across, then up, right? It would kind of look like this, and I'll make it a little bit thick. It would be like, this would be the supply curve. That's not thick enough. This would be the supply curve, like boom, 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 right? Because then that way you could more readily see that this is coming from domestic, that's coming from international, and then that's coming back from domestic suppliers, okay? This will be a little bit clearer on the next diagram. Take a look. Okay? So now we have a situation, right, where the quota, this is coming from U.S. producers, then world producers, then U.S. producers, okay? But this point right here is actually really important as well, because the actual market is now going to operate at this level of, can operate right here, okay? So the market is operating at P quota, right? Q4. And you might say, why? Well, because as soon as the quota, markets respond to government interaction pretty quickly. Before the quota, we were operating at PWQ2. But as soon as the quota came in place, everybody knew that what was going to happen to the amount of corn in the United States. It was going to become more scarce, which means the price is going to go up. So as soon as the quota was announced, the price went up to P quota Q4. Okay? So that is where the market is operating. Okay. That's pretty important. All right? So, what happens? Okay. Let's look at the revenue coming in now to U.S. producers. Okay. U.S. producers are making, remember, the corn here. And as a result of making the corn here, right, what does it mean? It means that there should be one line right here. 1 second. This line needs to extend up there. Okay? That means that U.S. producers are, this is U.S., U.S. What's the price they're getting? P quota. Okay? So U.S. producers are now earning, based on the quota, A plus B plus G. Okay? Hold on to it, but that's what they're getting right now. Then what happened? Well, then the U.S. opened up its market to world markets, to world producers. And so the distance from Q3 to Q5 right here, where is that money going? That money is going into the pockets of world producers. And what's the price they're getting? P quota, right? So world producers right? They used to get C plus D plus E plus F. Now they're only getting C and H, but at a higher price. Then what happens? Well, then the United States slams the door shut, and the only corn that's left in the house is U.S. produced corn. So as a result of that, guess where all of this revenue from Q3 out to Q4 is coming from? Or this revenue is going to? Of course, it's going to U.S. producers. Okay, so make that a little bit clearer. Make that a little bit clearer. And you all of a sudden have revenue boxes that are domestic producers, in this case from the U.S., that are that. And then you have foreign producers, which are this. Post-quota. Okay? That's pretty clear. That's pretty clear. That's pretty clear. Now, one last thing. What about the welfare loss? Yeah, what about the welfare loss? Well, what about the welfare loss? Well, let me tell you something. Where was the market operating before the quota? Well, it was operating at PWQ2. Now what's the price of corn in the US? P quota. So now this triangle of letter L is not being consumed. So that's a welfare loss. Now, welfare loss is any misallocation of resources. Who are these people? These people are U.S. producers who, without the quota, would not be producing corn. So, guess what? J and K are also a welfare loss. So the entire welfare loss as a result of the quota is J plus K plus L. Okay? So, there you have it. The protectionist quota diagram and its impact on domestic producers, on world producers, and also on the overall allocation of resources in the universe, in the world, or at least in the United States. And you can see here, I think that's one black triangle, and there's two black triangles. So a quota has two black triangles, a subsidy has one, protection of tariff has two, and that's really important for your studies because you might get a question somewhere along the line of like, what's actually better in terms of the allocation of resources, and the subsidy is better than both the protective tariff and the protected quota because it has less welfare loss. Okay? Listen, if you need more help in understanding those terms, check out the notes that are associated with this video. Of course, these slides are also associated with the video, but really this is one that you got to practice drawing and over and over and over again, especially the weirdness and the way in which the revenue is calculated, okay? And I think if you follow the process that I went through, it's pretty intuitive. Remember, economics is a story. And if you have to write an analysis and an evaluation of a quota or a tariff or diagram, guess what? You need to tell the story. Written work is a story. So build the diagram as a story, and you'll be helping yourself better understand the diagram, which will lead to you being able to draw it better, and of course, be able to better on an analysis and an evaluation. And my friends, we're almost done with this unit. Rolling on to the next video.